anatomy parts that make them different from other fish. So I'll talk about that as we go into the craft. One question I have is, what is the Fins United Initiative? Good question. So the Fins United Initiative is my program. If you see at the bottom right of the paper, it says finsunited.co.nz. That is my own program where I talk about diverse sharks, skates, rays, chimeras, and also the diverse scientists that study them around the world. My program kind of shows you the sharks you don't see on Shark Week and shows you the scientists you usually don't see on TV. We are actually expanding. We've got a whole entire page now dedicated to shark anatomy that we're building. And so this is actually a perfect time to go into shark anatomy with you guys. So I'm quite excited. Hi, Eleanor, Sarita, and Isla. We've got a question from Storm Magazine saying, how many sharks have been hunted in a year? Good question. It depends what you mean by hunted. So there are some stable shark fisheries where people do eat fish or eat shark. For example, in the US, you've got in the New England kind of area, you've got the spiny dogfish fishery, and that one is actually stable. It's called the Cape shark up there sometimes, and you'll have fish and chips, and your fish will actually be shark. So Fish Initiative actually has a whole entire web page or page in the website devoted to sustainable fishery apps all around the world. We've got ones from Japan, New Zealand, Australia, the US, Canada. I don't think I'm missing anything. Oh, Africa. That you can download one of those apps. Usually they're free. And you can, whenever you're going out to either buy fish or order fish, you can see if that is actually a sustainably caught animal. And that's a great way for you to actually help keep our oceans healthy. It starts at the grocery store and it starts on your dinner plate. So yeah, very good question of how many sharks are hunted in a year. The answer is we don't really know because it's everything from sustainable fisheries to bycatch, which bycatch is when the fishermen are after one fish, but they accidentally get other fish as well. The nets are what's called non-discriminatory. So when you put a net in the ocean, it can't really tell, oh, this isn't the animal you want. Let me throw it out. It's stuck in there anyways. So that's what bycatch is. And then you do have people who hunt sharks illegally as well for their fins, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Campbell asks, how old were you when you decided to become a marine biologist? I was 4, actually. I told my parents really young I want to be a marine biologist, but my first love was actually with manatees instead of sharks, and it kind of just morphed into sharks later on. And Rebecca asks, what inspired me to study sharks? My first encounter with sharks was through Shark Week on the Discovery Channel. And just seeing them on TV, I mean, I've never seen an animal like that. So it was really cool for me to see that the first time. And it just kind of stuck with me. I was like, that's it. That's what I want to study. And speaking of sharks, let's get into our craft. So most sharks have something that's called countershading. Countershading is like this guy. See, this is why I have props. So countershading is something that's not actually only seen in sharks. It's actually seen in land animals too. And it's when it's used mostly for camouflage from prey or predators. So basically what wants to eat an animal and what an animal eats. So countershading is when it's dark on the top and they usually have a white belly on the bottom. Now this is good because if you are an animal that's bigger than the shark, we'll pretend the stapler, because I only have so many shark stuffies. We'll pretend the stapler is a predator of this shark. And yes, sharks do eat other sharks. If the predator is swimming above the shark, the dark top part actually blends in with the bottom of the ocean. So the predator, if he doesn't have the best eyesight, can't really see the shark. Same thing happens if the predator's below. Because there is some sunlight that filters through and makes the water a little bit white, the white tummy kind of camouflages the animal. So quite a lot of sharks have this, even if they live on the bottom of the ocean. And by that, I mean bottom of the ocean, I mean like coral reefs and stuff as well. Usually if you get down to the deep sea, they tend to be just an all black or all dark color. So for this one, I'm actually going to draw my favorite shark, which is a tiger shark. Now, a tiger shark is usually an all gray color with some stripes on it. Now, the stripes get lighter as the shark ages, but when it's a pup or a baby shark, they're really, really bright. So, contrary to belief, tiger sharks are not orange and black. So I'm gonna get a gray pencil and a brown pencil. And I'm also gonna get a pen. The pen is because I'm gonna draw the gills. So sharks, let me explain what gills are first. Gills are the way that sharks breathe. Kind of like how we have lungs. Everyone take a deep breath. Right. That was helped by, or we did that with our lungs. Sharks don't have lungs. They have something called gills. I'll draw them real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. So the gills are normally there-ish. So behind the eye, kind of like with this guy here. Well, female technically. So how the shark breathes depends on the shark. Sometimes, like a great white shark, they have to continuously swim, and usually they have their mouth open a little bit. And it's something called ram ventilation. And ram ventilation is when the water gets rammed into the shark's mouth and then gets pushed out of the gills. And that way, because there's oxygen in the water, the gills here have structures that help get that oxygen out of the water and into the bloodstream of the shark. So that's how they breathe. Some sharks, you might notice, are actually on the bottom of the ocean, and they kind of just open and close their mouth like, it's really funny. But that's what they do, and that's how they push water out through their gills so they can breathe. Now, it depends on the shark how many gills they have. On average, it's about 5. Ignore this one has 4, so it's not anatomically correct. But on average, they have 5. Some sharks, and even actually some stingrays and skates, have 6 gills, and some have 7. Why they have more? Not exactly sure. That's something that we would like to study. So, my tiger shark has 5 gill slits. Usually, they have 5 gill slits. So, I have drawn the 5 gill slits. Now, I had someone ask how many stripes does a tiger shark have? We don't actually know. It actually varies between tiger sharks. It's kind of like a fingerprint. You know how everyone's fingerprint is different? It's the same exact way with these stripes. They can vary, and they can be used for identity purposes. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do some counter shading on the shark. So it's usually right below the nose. Covers some of the gills, and then the tail usually is entirely covered. So let me show you what I mean by that. Alright, so I have drawn a line there. So anything below this line is going to be white. Anything above it is going to be a gray color. So I'm going to start drawing in, and I'll look at some of your questions. How do you swim with sharks without getting hurt? Good question. So, S'more Magazine actually asked me the same thing, and it is on their January magazine. And actually, I have my copy right here. So, it is on page 11. So these are my diving tips and swimming tips, really, with sharks. Basically, you want to stick with a buddy. You want to make sure that you are going not during the times that the sharks would normally be, which is dusk and dawn. A lot of times they're out there. That is, depending on the shark species, is when they are most active. If you see people fishing nearby, you want to make sure you are not swimming near there because sharks are attracted to blood. And try not to wear shiny jewelry. Shiny jewelry in the water does glimmer and it is shiny and it kind of looks like fish scales. So they will be interested in that. Sharks are very curious by nature. So yeah, those are my tips usually, and also swim with a buddy. I never swim alone because if there's some sort of emergency, I have someone to back me up, which is nice. Let's see what else. There's someone who asked something about the website, but the question got cut off. Are you seeing sharks affected by climate change? That's actually not my area of expertise, but I have friends who do study sharks and climate change, and that's actually going to be a page on Finge United Initiative. And I'm working with that because I'm a big proponent or a big advocate of collaborations. I don't think one scientist can do it all. So I'm asking my friends to help me out, and they're being really cool and helping me out. But it turns out that yes, climate change is affecting sharks. Their migration patterns seem to be changing, and for the ones that have really pretty patterns on them, their patterns aren't as bright, which isn't really helping them. But that's to the extent that I know, because again, that's not my area of expertise. But if you have questions about that, feel free to jump on Finge United Initiative, contact us there, and actually I can get you in touch with one of my friends who studies that sort of stuff, and they can give you some answers. Let's see, what's the smallest shark in the world? Ooh, that is a good question. Scientists debate on which shark is the smallest just because usually the deep sea sharks, you don't have a representative population. And what I mean by that is that we don't have a lot of samples of deep sea sharks. They're hard to get. And so right now, to my knowledge, the pygmy shark is the smallest, and I think it's like less than 3 centimeters, maybe less than 4 centimeters, so it is a small shark. But yeah, the smallest sharks in the world are going to be the deep sea sharks, definitely. All right, how are you guys doing with your counter shading? I've got this so far, kind of looking more like a great white shark than a tiger shark, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. Let's see what else. What happens if a shark is born with a defect or disability? How does it adapt to survive? Good question. There are quite a lot of sharks that are born with disabilities. Well, I shouldn't say that there are a lot of sharks born with disabilities or defects. It's more of the news will catch up and see that a shark is born with a disability, and then it's plastered all over the news for a while. I find mutations really interesting. A few years ago, there was a lemon shark that was actually born with just one eye, so it was a cyclops, essentially. Unfortunately, it died very quickly. We've had bull sharks and blue sharks that are born with 2 heads and 1 body. It's really interesting. We're not exactly sure what causes these mutations, but they don't live long, sadly, just because nature is that way. And if you're not the strongest, you die very quickly out there. And that is the same for sharks, who are predators. If sharks are intelligent, why do they mistake humans for prey? Good question. So, like any intelligent animal, they do make mistakes. They go off of visual cues, which, you know, humans, they see us now and then, but we're still quite new to them. Remember, the ocean's not our home, so we're not always there. If you look at a sea turtle, a person on a surfboard, and a seal, from below, they look very similar very quickly. I'm actually going to show you something real quick on this shark. So, depending the shark, sometimes they have something called a nictitating membrane, which actually goes over their eye, which is right there. Now, the nictitating membrane closes it rolls its head back, or it rolls its eyes back, and it doesn't see for the last little bit. So, like, the last few seconds before it bites something, it's actually completely blind, and it just relies on the rest of its senses. So they do make mistakes sometimes. That's just a part of nature, but they are very, very smart, and like any smart animal, they do make mistakes. I mean, we all make mistakes, and it's the same with sharks. It's actually a miracle that more people don't get bit because of how the population has kind of boomed, and the human population has boomed, and there's a lot more of us going into the water. And on average, there's around 6 uh, shark bites around the world. So yeah, it's a really, really low number considering. All right, so I am going in to my shark and starting to draw the stripes. Now, the cool thing about the tiger shark is that they're not straight stripes like a regular tiger. They're actually blotches that kind of go into a long bit. So you've got that. So they've got their stripes all throughout. This is called the dorsal side. Now, the dorsal side is the side you mostly see of sharks in movies. You've got the dorsal fin, which helps keep the shark stable. You've got the caudal fin, also known as the caudal fin, also known as the tail. Think of it as the propeller for the shark, so it keeps it going forward. Then you've got the pectoral fins. The pectoral fins are, think of them like airplane wings. So they actually help the shark not only stabilize, but actually move. So by that, I mean the angle that they turn the fins at, and it's a very small angle, but if they turn them down, they're going to go down. If they turn them up, they're going to go up. It's a really, really fascinating thing. We talk about this more on Fins United Initiative in our shark anatomy page. If you click the fins one or the fins page, you'll actually learn more about that, the mechanics of the fins, which is really cool. Then you've also got the pelvic fins and the anal fin. This is also called the second dorsal fin. A lot of sharks do have, sometimes it's a little bit bigger than that one. The anal fin kind of is like the rudder of a boat, so helps a little bit with more stabilization. And pelvic fin also for stabilization. And if you are a male shark, you actually have an extension, which I'm going to draw here, that's called a clasper. So they kind of look like that on sharks. That's actually how you can tell a female shark from a male shark, are those claspers. And those are the reproductive organs of a shark. So that is how a male shark puts sperm into a female shark to make shark pups or shark babies. Usually when we tag a shark, I will show you where we attach tags normally. I'm drawing it right now. All right, we've got one there, got one there. All right, so a lot of times you see shark tracking apps, and what that is you'll actually get a tag on the dorsal fin like that with a little radio antenna sometimes. And every time this dorsal fin comes out of the water, it sends a signal of all the data to a certain amount of satellites. And the satellites pick up the data, triangulate, which means they kind of hone in on the GPS point of the shark. If you guys have Google Maps, you know how it does that little blue dot where you are? Very similar for the sharks here. So sometimes we have it there. Sometimes we have one that kind of trails around, like there. And sometimes we actually even put a tag inside of the shark. So it can, those tags are mostly trying to figure out the insides of the shark. So what's the body temperature of the shark, the pH level sometimes. I haven't worked with those tags that much, but those are there sometimes. And sometimes people, depends, because tags are very, very expensive. Sometimes they just put a little colored tag like that on the dorsal fin or another one of the fins. And that usually, it's a very, very small tag, almost looks like a straw. So kind of like that. It'll say the lab's name and, hey, if this is found, please return to blah, blah, blah. That doesn't have any data on it. It can't pick up any data. But if someone accidentally catches the shark, they can call the scientist and be like, hey, I caught your shark at blah, blah, blah location. And the scientist can make note of that. So there are many ways to tag sharks and use that science to help with habitat use, population, and whatnot for these. All right, so where does the line that separates the color fall? So really depends on the shark. Usually you start seeing it kind of like this one right before the tail. The tail is always the same color. So usually around that anal fin there. Kind of like I've got it right there. Then let's see, relating to the great white, how do they sleep while breathing if they always have to move? Good question. Sharks do not sleep like you and I do. It's actually not well known if sharks sleep and how they rest. We do know that they rest. We're not sure, or at least I'm not sure, if they sleep like dolphins, where they turn off half of their brain while the other half is awake. But yeah, they do not sleep like you and I do. They do not sleep for 8 hours. So yes, they do need to continuously move. Can get a bit tiring. I don't know if I would want to be one of those sharks. They're called obligate ram ventilators, so the ones that have to continuously swim. I don't know if I'd want to be one of them, just because I'd get tired after a while. All right, what's the hardest class you had to take in your education? Organic chemistry. Getting my undergraduate degree in marine ecology and conservation, I did have to take organic chemistry. I did not like organic chemistry. It was not fun for me, and so that's definitely been my hardest. Outside of that, physics. Definitely physics, but I found that to be a lot of fun because I had really good professors, and I had good professors for both classes. Just organic chemistry. You know how sometimes you take a subject and you're like, this is not for me? That's what it was for organic chemistry and me. Why are female great white sharks larger than male great white sharks? Good question. So that's actually for all sharks mostly. Females will be larger than males, and the reason for that is because they kind of take a little bit more abuse than the males. I'll actually kind of show you. So, oh, you can see my wonderful drawing too of my tiger shark. So we've got the male shark. Well, that's the male shark. We'll pretend this is the female then. What the male shark will actually do, depending the species, this isn't for all of them, the male shark will actually bite right here oftentimes, so the pectoral fins, to hold the female still so he can insert that clasper into her cloaca, which is her sexual reproductive organ. So they have to be a little bit bigger for that and just to deal with that kind of abuse. They also take a bit to sexually mature. So yeah, that's why they tend to be bigger. Why do you track sharks? Good question, Eleanor. So for us, we track sharks to figure out where they're going and why. That is what my kind of specialty is trying to figure out why these sharks are where they are and how we can better protect them. And the way we do that is by figuring out where they go and why these areas need to be protected. So good question. What is the most friendly shark? Ooh, I don't want to say any shark is friendly because I don't want to encourage you to go petting sharks. You need to remember that these are wild animals, kind of like how if you were in an African safari, you wouldn't go out and pet the lion. You know, you've got the safari guides telling you to stay a distance, you know, respect the animal. That's the same exact thing I'm going to tell you. You should not be touching these animals. They are not a pet. They are not a puppy dog. They are an animal that has been around for 400 million years, and first and foremost, they are predators. So I would not say that there is any shark that is quote unquote friendly, but there are ones that are a little bit less, they're more mild mannered, kind of like the nurse sharks that you see in the Bahamas that are on the like submerged platforms that kind of rest there. Again, do not touch them, please. I don't want you guys getting hurt. The pictures that you see of me holding Isabella, kind of like this one, it has been years of training on how to do that. It's about learning the shark's body language. You can tell when they're getting stressed. You can tell when they're not liking what you're doing, and that's when you know you're supposed to back off. That's not something you can pick up on a YouTube video. That is something that it takes years to do. So I do not recommend holding a shark. I think the best way to admire and respect a shark is to give it its distance. Let's see. What things do you like to do outside of your work? Good question. I really like coloring. I like puzzles too. Me and my husband are working on a 1,000-piece Australian puzzle, which I'm really, really excited about. We're almost done with it. Almost done with it. We just got it on Friday, uh, which was 2 days ago for me. And so I really like doing puzzles. I like running. I like scuba diving. After this, I'm going to the beach with my husband to enjoy some time over there because I'm actually leaving for some field work on Wednesday, and I'm not going to be back until the middle of the next month. So we need some Melly and Josh time, definitely, before I leave them for a bit. But yeah, I like going shopping. I was at the mall yesterday. I like going to the movies. So basically, I'm like you. I just study really, really big predators. What's the sexual organ on a shark? Where on the shark is it? Good question. So the sexual organ for the sharks is gonna be, let me finish drawing a little bit. It's gonna be the clasper, and it's gonna be right behind the pelvic fin right there. So you can see that. You can see that. It kind of looks like a hot dog, basically. So that is the only sexual organ that is outside of the body for sharks, and that is on the males. So if a shark has that, it is a male shark. What type of data do these transmitters send you, and how do you use them? Good question. We'll get GPS, so where these sharks are. We'll get temperature of the water. We'll get sometimes, depending on the tag, how deep they go, the oxygen levels of the water around them, and that sort of information. We kind of piece together exactly what it is that they are doing down there. All right, I am done with my tiger shark. It is not the best looking tiger shark, but that's okay. And now you will want to get your scissors and start cutting. So usually I try to cut like the big bits first, and I'll show you what I mean by that. It's a lot easier to do and then put together. Let's see what else. How long do sharks live? Depends the species of sharks, but the Greenland shark just made the news as the longest living vertebrate because it was shown to live around 400 years. So if you think about that, there are sharks in the waters today that were around during the American Civil War. That's nuts. So yeah, very, very cool. Some sharks live a few hundred years, like 100 years, and a few live 20 years, some live only 10 years. Really depends on the species of sharks. All right. Have you gotten hurt by a shark at work? No. The only thing that I've ever, and I wouldn't even really consider it an injury, more of just like something that comes with sharks, is shark burn. So shark burn is when the dermal denticles, remember how we were talking about them in the beginning, how they feel like sandpaper? I was holding on to a shark and transferring it from one tank to another. And it kind of wiggled around because obviously a shark's not going to like being manhandled essentially. And when it twisted, the way I was holding it, it's like I was holding Isabella, so behind the pectoral fins, and its body scraped against my wrist here, and it honestly it looks like rug burn essentially. And so that was it. It was a little sore for a bit because it was in the salt water, and salt water with you know, a wound isn't actually the best. But other than that, nope, have never been bitten, never been charged at. You know, I know how to read their body language and whatnot. So I know if I'm in a situation that doesn't seem like the shark's enjoying it, I know to get out. But thankfully, I've never been in that kind of situation. All right, how are you guys doing with your cutting? I basically just did like a round circle around them, and now I'm going into the nitty gritty. I may cut his claspers. What advice would you give on how to deal with boys? I'm always the only girl. Preach, I know that feeling. To be honest, it's easier said than done, but ignore them. If you are passionate about what you are doing, don't let them get into your head. If they're saying sexist things, you know, tell a teacher or tell someone who's in charge and be like, look, so and so is making these sorts of comments. I'm not comfortable with them. I don't think they're professional. I know I've had to do that before. And people are normally on your side about it, which is nice. Because I remember back in my early days, they weren't always so receptive. And so, yeah, just keep your head on high. You're doing amazing work as one of the only girls there. And, I'm very hopeful that the tide is going to change. Puns. And that we'll get better at this. So I think a lot more girls will be in STEM sooner rather than later. All right, almost done. Well, at least with one of them. So excited. Where are you guys gonna put your shark? I'm gonna put him in my office. Yeah, his claspers are coming off. I don't feel like cutting around them. Sorry. There we go. All right. A little bit more.